Hello and welcome to episode number 36 of JRocks Pop Culture Revolution. I'm your host, Jason JRock Houston, and we got a very special guest to it, Dave, our very good friend Mick Michaels, a guitarist and principal songwriter for Corners of Sanctuary. Mick, we got to let people know a little behind the scenes story here. We tried to do this yesterday. Seemed to be going great. It was a great practice session, but at the end of the day, the Zoom was freezing up and it didn't convert the video file like it should. So great practice session, but we're going to do this for real this time. So, like I said, one thing I've known about you over the years interviewing you is you're a huge Kiss fan like me, huge Judas Priest fan. So I thought no better person to do this with than you. So why don't we start off sharing with everybody how you first got into the music of Judas Priest?
Well, I credit that to my older brother. He was a big Judas Priest fan, and I kind of was introduced to the Priest through him early on, like in the late 70s. Mm-hmm. He also at that time played in a Judas Priest tribute band, late 70s, early 80s. And they did a lot of their early stuff, of course, and they did the Stained Class album, and of course by 1980 they were doing a lot of the things off of British Steel. So so Priest was kind of like I Kiss. I was introduced to Kiss from my older brother, and then graduated to Judas Priest. Not when he did, but probably within a few years following.
So in the DNA, you're saying, right? Okay.
Yeah. It was definitely a family thing for sure. Yeah, and both Kiss and Judas Priest, my favorite bands even till this day.
Yeah, and of course, being a guitar player, how could you not love those riffs that Glenn and KK were coming up with? But I got to ask, was there one guitar player in Priest that you lean more towards?
Oh, yeah. I'm a huge KK Downing fan. I play very similar rhythm styles like he does, especially now. I mean, KK was a lead guitar player all the time. Unfortunately, over the years, he's always been kind of shadowed as a rhythm guitar player. But definitely, his rhythm style is something that I've always gravitated towards. And one of the greatest things that ever happened to me is just a couple years ago. I got to meet KK in person. Talked with him a little bit, got some interviews and some pictures, which I was totally floored by, which was kind of cool because a few years before I had got to interview him for my Cosmic View page, and this was just kind of like icing on the cake. But yeah, it was an amazing time.
Yeah, that could go either way. I mean, your stories have people mean they're heroes, but that's great when you meet your hero and it works, and he's just nothing but a great guy, huh?
Oh yeah, he was super friendly. I mean, I didn't plan to meet him. I was there to see KK's Priest, and I was hanging out with some people in the back of the theater, and I was actually talking with another rock star who was part of the opening act that I'm friendly with, and all of a sudden this black car pulls up and KK gets out and literally in front of me, and it was just totally. I was so starstruck that I didn't know how to function. I didn't have anything to get it autographed or anything. Another rock star had to give me a Sharpie to get the autograph.
That's cool. Well, you got to be your hero. And we were talking yesterday, of course, about the fact that your band Corners of Sanctuary, a few years ago, you guys put out a great cover of Breaking the Law. We were talking about the fact that the video used some old black and white footage from a Buster Keaton movie. So to talk a little bit about the video and why you decided to use that Buster Keaton footage there, because I think it's a cool tie-in,
Yeah, well, I mean, again, like Breaking the Law is one of those universal metal songs that I think, regardless of what generation you came up through in metal, it's one of the anthems of the genre, right? Mm-hmm. So it's always been a staple in my listening. So it was like, if we were going to do it, we were going to do a different type of version of it, but it's pretty close. But for the video, I mean, I like a lot of the old stuff, and I grew up as many of us did in the 70s and early 80s with only 3 stations, and Sunday mornings they used to play a lot of like Buster Keaton,
Yeah.
Charlie Chaplin, Laurel and Hardy, the Marx Brothers, and so on and so forth. So I got into the habit of watching them as a little kid,
Yeah.
and I knew of the movie, and I thought that it would be kind of a cool take on the song, our version of Breaking the Law, but in a
Yeah.
funny type of kind of way.
Yeah. It's kind of like when Metallica did the video for One, they included the footage from that movie, Johnny Get a Gun. And I think is cool about your video is, again, I've heard of Buster Keaton. I'm not probably as well versed on him as you are, but just watching your video, it kind of influenced me. Okay, that looks so cool. And now knowing it's from a movie, I'm like, a Buster Keaton movie in particular, I gotta go check that out. And so it's cool when you can bring other influences you have into your music and kind of inspire other people to check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Those guys back then, they had such a talent because they weren't necessarily talking on camera, but their actions and facial expressions,
Yeah.
and what somebody like Buster Keaton did in those early days for stunt coordination in film. I mean, he did all that stuff himself. But there's one scene in the video that we edited together where I guess he broke out of the prison and he closes the gate. He thinks he's free and he turns around and there's a guard or the warden there,
Oh,
and he's
wow.
got this
Wow.
facial expression. And the funny of that is that it's timeless. And you're talking about a film that's 100 plus years old.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you can still watch them, just made 100 years ago. That's amazing. And I was curious if you guys ever performed Breaking the Law live, and if so, what was the reaction you got from the crowd?
Yeah, we have. And here's the thing: our very first time performing the song was when we were in the UK,
Oh,
and we weren't sure that we wanted to do it. We had rehearsed it before going out, and just in case we have it. We didn't do it until our third night into the tour, and it was just an amazing response. I mean, you would think about, like, because our fear was, and not that it really was a fear, but the concern is, hey, we're playing a
no.
British band's music
Yeah,
in Britain. We
yeah,
got to
yeah,
make sure we hit it, right? So we
yeah.
definitely needed a couple nights to warm up, but it went over fantastic. I do recall midway, when the crowd's singing "Breaking the Law, Breaking the Law," I look over to my bass player because I got this feeling, and the idea is like, I can't believe we're getting this reaction from a song that isn't ours, and I kind of felt cheap about it in an essence, because I had never played covers before in my life. I never got into this to play covers, but it was just a really cool feeling that our version was being accepted. So we figured that was the end of it.
Yeah.
2 nights later, we were in another city in Britain, if that's what they call them, and we didn't have it on the set list, but we're up on stage, and the word had gotten from the one town, I guess, to the
The
next
next
two
down.
towns over to play it, and people were chanting, play Breaking the Law, play Breaking the Law. So we had to actually midway set kind of interject it in there.
Oh,
So
you gotta love that. Wow. Your reputation is spreading.
yeah.
Now, today, what we're going to really be talking about, Mick, in part two of our Judas Priest special, is you may remember about 40 years ago, in 1986, there was a lawsuit filed against the Mighty Priest, where two Priest fans had committed suicide. They'd actually made a suicide pact to kill each other. And the parents attempted to sue the band over the fact that not only did they make the pact, but they killed themselves listening to Judas Priest music, in particular the song "Better by You," "Better Than Me," than off the Stained Class album. What do you remember, from that time when you first heard about the lawsuit?
Well, I remember that feeling like, hey, that's kind of crazy. I've heard that song. I mean, first off, Stained Class is my favorite Judas Priest album, so I've listened to it. I can't tell you how many times. And I never got that feeling from any of that. And that was kind of the first response that I have. I had, what are they talking about? That's crazy. That's not, the Judas Priest I know. But to put it in context for those that may not remember or just don't know, especially at that time, most of that early to mid 80s, there was a lot of backlash towards music from religious groups, political groups, social groups. I mean, it was coming from everywhere, and they were worried about, music, especially hard rock, and as heavy metal got more and more
Popular. Yeah.
predominant, popular, that it was, destroying the fabric of our nation's youth.
Yeah.
And I mean, they even went as far as some of these groups to accuse toy companies and cartoons of being part of the occult and all. So it was like everybody was looking for a bandwagon and a pedestal to stand on, to preach this kind of negative. Actually, in essence, it was a lot of negativity, unfounded.
Oh, sure.
So, but I remember saying, like, I don't recall that. And, the whole thing about do it, do it, do it. I mean, I had listened to that song, I can't tell you how many times, both on, massive stereos. We used to also use the real high fidelity headphones and all. I never ever picked up. And I remember a lot of us going back over the song and going, where are they hearing this at?
Yeah.
But, you've come to learn that, and you can see this quite often in social media posts, that if they put up two words on the screen and have some kind of whispering going on, whatever they say, whatever word you focus on is the word you hear. So if somebody tells you, hey, this backward masking says, my sweet Satan, like they accused Led Zeppelin of doing, then that's what you're going to hear. It's already there. It's already pre-programmed, because that's the way our minds work. Just like our minds are geared up to find faces in all designs, because that's how we relate to things.
Yeah, you make a lot of great points. I even remember they used to think Gene Simmons was the devil, and that KISS stood for Knights in Satan Service. People just make this stuff up, when if you really would have researched, they'd find out that he based his demon character more on his love of horror movies than anything else,
Yeah. It's kind of like, again, it was, and in my experience, and including myself, most musicians don't have the time, the energy, or the interest to try to take over the world. And it always baffled me. Like if you remember G.I. Joe, the cartoon back in the 80s, there was one episode where Cobra had those dreadnought guys create a band to take over the youth. And I was like, man, rock stars don't have time to be taking over the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And when the Judas Priest lawsuit was filed, the kind of interesting thing, like a lot with the PMRC, when they put those stickers on, the more you try to censor something, the more people want it. And I remember when the lawsuit was filed, like you said, more people. This album came out in the late '70s, so it's 1986 at this point, and people are hearing about this Judas Priest album. It's in the news. More people are going out and buying it just because they want to check it out, or because somebody's telling them they can't have it.
Right. Well, by '86. Well, remember, so Stained Class comes out in '78, right?
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
86, they were on the Fuel for Life tour with Turbo. And
yeah.
that's really when Judas Priest kind of crossed over into some of the mainstream. They had TV commercials for Turbo. They were popping up on MTV more. So all of a sudden, it was a successful juggernaut that, that you could jump on to try to get some kind of financial reward. And again, I don't know if the parents that was their thinking, or the lawyers or somebody in their camp said, hey, you know what? There's all this stuff going on behind the scenes with music and TV, and they're trying to corrupt the youth, our children. There may be a payday in here. All you had to do, I mean, that was the point where somebody on a legal team or whatever said, we're jumping on board, let's make this happen. It was a springboard. I mean, prior to that, you really weren't getting anything. I mean, you did have some of the PMRC hearings and stuff like that. But like you said, popping them stickers on actually just made people want to buy the stuff even more.
Yeah, they even had the famous Filthy 15 list. And again, the record sales for those artists all of a sudden went up even more,
Yep, exactly.
And now let's get a little more into the law. It said the lawsuit against Judas Priest was filed in 1986 by the families of two young men from Nevada, Raymond Belknap and James Vance, after a 1985 suicide pact in which Belknap killed himself instantly, and Vance, he lived a few more years. He didn't die instantly, and he was in the hospital for the rest of his life, and he eventually died 2 years later from his injuries. So you can imagine what the rest of his life was like. And if you think about it, Mick, these two poor guys, I mean, I don't know if the parents thought about this at the time when they filed the lawsuit. They must have been going through some awful pain, you can imagine. But this has become the legacy of those two boys. This is sadly died tragically young, and this is what they will always be remembered for.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine what those family members were going through, right? But then on the other side, what were these individuals going through that they, decided to make this choice? Now, at the same time, because we don't know, we can speculate.
Uh,
I mean, maybe at the time it was kind of cool. Hey, let's do the suicide pact. It's like, we'll be friends for life. We'll go out together, we'll blaze of glory, all that kind of thing. I don't know. It just so happens that that night maybe Judas Priest was the soundtrack. It could have been any band at the
yeah, yeah,
time,
yeah,
because if you were in the Judas Priest, chances are at that time you were in the other bands. So
yeah.
it was just the luck of the draw what band got
I
got the
got picked.
choice,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that night.
But
Yeah,
at the same time, both of these guys, one guy could have been really experiencing the sadder part of life, and the other guy just kind of jumped on board to be with his buddy. I don't know,
yeah, yeah.
but I don't think it had anything to do with the music, man. Listen, I've been listening to hard rock, heavy metal most of my life. And prior to that, I mean, even now I still listen to pop music and other things because music is, to me, empowering. Never once have I felt the need to hurt myself
No, no,
because of listening to music. I've used music as a way to make me feel better, to enhance my current
exactly. Yeah,
feeling good. So maybe that's just me, but I doubt it, because music is a universal language, and I think more and more, most people take it that way.
yeah.
But I think that these guys were probably suffering from something a little bit more than just the music choices, and maybe some of that could have been stemming from home. I
Oh,
don't
sure,
know,
sure.
but I do know that it's not, though artists do have some moral and ethical responsibility to present things in a positive light, maybe. But
Yeah,
at the same time, it's also not their responsibility to police who is listening to their music or looking at their art. That's, at some age, that's an adult's choice. But if you're talking about minors, well, maybe the parents should have been more involved, maybe not. I don't know.
yeah,
I'm a parent. I'm a grandparent. I spent, the better part of being involved and making sure. And the truth of the matter is, you don't always know what your kids are getting into,
yeah, yeah.
but you got to be vigilant. Probably more now than ever. But I don't know, man. It's sad. But on the flip side, it was a shame that the band had to go through something. Thankfully, it was found that there was no grounds here to keep them accountable and or responsible. But it could have shifted the other way and opened up a floodgate that every bit of art that we experience in our world would have been under scrutiny.
Yeah, it really is a shame. And like you're saying, you ever been to a concert? It's a gathering event. People, especially metalheads, because metal has been the underdog for so many years, something like this brings the fans together, and in fact, when they were found not guilty, a lot of Judas Priest, not all, but I say all the Judas Priest fans were like, yeah, these guys defended the heavy metal faith and they won.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know. I mean, it wasn't that they were just fight. I mean, listen, the truth of the matter is, as artists, they weren't just fighting for heavy metal music or hard rock. They were fighting for,
Their
and then
lives.
these guys weren't even Americans per
Yeah, yeah,
se.
yeah.
They were fighting for the basic right of self-expression
Hmm.
across the board, right? Cross
Yeah.
society, cross nations, cross countries.
Hmm.
And there has to be some kind of line where the individual can be themselves
Hmm.
without this judgment that it's I don't know, without sounding like I'm
Yeah,
being I'm
yeah,
discrediting the situation or playing it down. But on a grander scale, censorship is happening all the time. and more now with the more freedoms that we have gotten in terms of how we communicate and advertise and promote and connect with other people, there seems to be more restrictions now than there ever was. And yet there's so much gray area to it, because what you may be offended by, I may not.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is the people that holler louder, make a bigger noise, and have a bigger stink about it seem to be, everyone kowtows to them because we're afraid of something. But then what you're doing is you're creating censorship, but you're taking away other people's right to be who they are. And not everybody's going to be just like you or me or whatever. And that's, I think, what makes being, who we are, human, so unique. Otherwise, I don't know if our world would have gotten past drawing in caves.
Yeah, I mean, you made the point yesterday, Mick, when we were attempting to do this, that you go back even to the 1950s, like with guys like Chuck Berry getting accused of singing the devil's music and the Crossroads and stuff like that. It goes all the way back to the 1950s.
Oh yeah, the whole thing with rock. I mean, even before rock and roll, you had the devil's chords in minstrel music and what Beethoven and Mozart and Chopin and all those guys would use, and in some religious sects or cultures that were heavily influenced by, they wouldn't touch them because they were afraid that they were going to open up a portal to another world and demons were going to come into the world. Listen, maybe they will, maybe they won't, I don't know. Even Led Zeppelin played with it a little bit, those demon chords or whatever they call them. I'm not even sure what that, but I think that art is something that is an expression of what's happening not only at that moment inside, but outside as well. Because a lot of us nowadays, because we're so inundated with you get onto your phone, which is probably one of the worst things ever for us. We are literally within seconds, we're inundated by, I don't know, thousands and thousands of things. Years ago, you got the news twice a day, 3 times a day. You got it at like 5:30 a.m., 12 noon, and 11 o'clock, 11:30 at night, right? And it was a half an hour. And people would go, I can't watch the news anymore. And you're only talking, some people only watched it once. Like my grandparents would watch it all 3 times. And half the time it's the same story. Now, we're inundated with it 24/7. So think about the negativity that's being rocked. So we're affected by all these things that are happening. How are we supposed to express it? How are we supposed to get it out? We can't bottle it up because, the studies show that bottling it up only causes these people to do the things that they do over the last 30 years and with school shootings and McDonald's mass shootings and, all that kind of stuff. Art, which, in our country, the government has cut the humanities programs everywhere. So children they're not encouraged to learn music, go into theater, learn to act, sing, dance, whatever, because, it's believed that there's no career in it and it doesn't offer us anything. But our whole culture, both here and abroad, which outdates us, art has been part of the culture since the very beginning. Otherwise, you wouldn't have the Michelangelos and the Da Vinci's and the Rodins and so on and so forth. You wouldn't have any of that.
Yeah. And a big part of the case, Mick, was them going into court, playing the song, "Better by You, Better Than Me," and playing it backwards and trying to find the subliminal messages. And they
were trying to find it in court.
And part of the reason that's exactly why the case fell apart. The judge said you cannot prove it. And I don't really think Judas Priest went in the studio. Okay, when we're recording this song, we're gonna record hidden backward messages.
No, I don't think that they probably intentionally did that, even though I did read an interview years ago with Glenn that he said that, especially in the late 70s, when they were given the okay to work their own albums as engineer, producer type of thing, they were working on effects, guitar sounds, and things like that, and they were just throwing all this stuff in. And a
Wow.
lot of that you can hear in Stained Class, but I don't think that there was backwards masking per
Mhm.
se. That though, here's the thing: there has been stuff that's been intentionally put in
Yeah,
to increase the sales or the marketing, the promotion of something, but it's been silly stuff. It's been nothing, and again, if it was that powerful, we'd all be walking around in a zombie state, wouldn't
trying to
we?
kill ourselves, right? Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
trying to kill ourselves, or killing ourselves wouldn't help the bad guys. We'd have to somehow give them all our money, so it doesn't make
and
sense.
making music for your fans to kill themselves. I don't think
Yeah, it doesn't
the
help
band
your
would be
bottom
making money.
line,
Nobody
man.
be buying the albums. Nobody be coming to the concert. So you don't really
Yeah, it
want to
doesn't
do
help your
that.
streams anymore.
Yeah. And again, all this has taken place before the internet ever existed. And talk about the news coverage back in the day. I remember another thing. A lot of the news anchors were definitely not into heavy metal music, so a lot of them were
No.
against it. A lot of them were kind of in the hopes that Judas Priest were going to be found.
Well, I think that they had the public, whether they were or not, I don't know. I can't
Yeah,
speak on that, but chances are they had to demonstrate that they weren't, simply because music at that well, one, news at that time, the demographic showed the age group, which was, a certain, like, say,
yeah,
40 and above, parent age, grandparent age. They were the people that were watching the news. Young people weren't watching the news, so they could care less. They were out
yeah,
living, not, you know what I mean? They were the ones
yeah,
making the news, not watching it. So they had to, just like any good band, you have to play to your audience, and
yeah,
that's what's sold, right?
yeah,
Because they figured the people that were spending the money were the people that were of the age. The younger people weren't. But what they didn't realize is, by the early 90s, more and more young people were working earlier and earlier, and they were
yeah,
starting to buy their own stuff.
yeah, yeah,
This is why MTV pushed that whole rock the vote thing.
yeah, yeah. And it's interesting too because Rob Halper was talking about when the judge, announced that they were found not guilty. He said, "Okay, I could not find that the subliminal messages were proven, but I want to go on record saying that if they would have been able to do that, the case may have turned out differently." And Rob Halford did not really like the judge saying that because he's like, okay, that's leaving the door open for other people to be sued in the future, you know?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, again, this was a first of its kind at that time, and it took a number of years to get to court.
Yeah,
But if it did go the other way, and they were found guilty on some accounts, and there was a payday to it,
yeah,
I think that every artist that followed, we wouldn't have the kind of exposition in music. Let's just talk music right now,
yeah,
that we
yeah,
have
yeah,
today, right? And I think the internet would have probably been a slightly different place because of that. Nowadays, you can kind of get everything and anything, and artists say and do anything. There isn't a mystery the way it used to be. Um, and I think that blurring of lines wouldn't be there. You would have a very sterile type of same old, that I think people, actually, that's what people
yeah,
complain about today, but whatever. I think it would have been a bad thing for it. It would have just carried over, not only into music, but into film, and articles and artwork, and even some of the classics,
yeah,
like somebody, I don't know, somebody could have said the same thing about the Mona Lisa. Staring at the Mona Lisa for 3 days in a row made me want to commit suicide. I
yeah,
mean, it
yeah,
almost sounds absurd in a way, right?
yeah. And I was reading the significance of this case was that all these years later, it remains one of the most significant legal cases, like in the music industry, to the point where it is still referred to. They've made
Yeah,
documentaries about it, um,
right.
it's still talked about, and it's one of those things that I don't think people will ever forget about. It was really great doing this with you, Mick. Before we wrap it up today, I'm glad this seems to be working today. Tell people what Corner Sanctuary has going on. You guys have a new single and EP coming up, so let's hear about that.
Yeah, we have a brand new digital single dropping July 7th on Sode Records called Crimson Sky. We also have a Crimson Sky merch package going to be available as of July 7th. It's a two-song mini CD and a two-page color comic that also comes with a Kaz axe pick. That'll
Wow.
be available. We got a new animated video coming out for it the same day. We also just were part of the When We Rock documentary. We helped write and produce the title track song called When We Rock. We're also performing with Jaron Golino from Lynch Mob and Reggie Wu from Heaven's Edge. They also appear on the track, so we're kind of excited about that. That's going to be coming out later in July as well. And we got a lot of stuff coming. We're celebrating 15 years this year. We
Way
got
to
a
go, Mick. Let me ask you, 15 years of Corners of Sanctuary. I know you guys love to pump out new music. You're a great songwriter, like we talked about, because that's why you really never did covers before, but you've been having fun doing that. Any
yeah.
chance of a COS greatest hits?
Yeah, I mean, well, we've had a couple compilations put out over the years of some of our songs.
Okay.
There may be there's some things out there now, but we have some stuff coming. We've been working on a Kaz autobiography the last couple years. It was supposed to release last year. We held off for the 15 year. We're actually considering not releasing it yet because sometimes when you put it, we were discussing this early in the year. We were like, well, sometimes you put out a autobiography kind of when like things are coming to an end or you've decided to quit, and we're not
At
quitting.
that point.
So we thought maybe, listen, there's more to write, so maybe we'll hold off. But we got a little summer tour that starts at the end of July, takes us all the way up into September. So we're kind of excited about that. We have been in the studio the last couple months working on a lot of new material, including a new holiday song for this year. And
Wow, wow, yeah, we can't wait for that.
yeah,
That's
so
always
we're staying
fun.
we're staying busy.
Well, maybe wait for 20th anniversary. Just 5 more years away, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, Mick, before we say goodbye, I wanted to just say it's great. It's great talking to you again, and man, take care. Okay.
All right, man. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay. Thanks, buddy.
All right. Bye bye.